Linda Hogan just leaked shocking footage of Hulk Hogan's death, and it changes everything. Following the heartbreaking loss of Hulk Hogan, Linda Hogan has just released shocking secret footage that has everyone talking. In the video, Hulk Hogan shares raw, emotional words that are now being seen as his final message to the world, and what he said was absolutely devastating. This never-before-seen footage is raising serious questions about what really happened in the final days of Hulk Hogan's life. Was it just a tragic accident, or something more? From Linda Hogan's bold revelations to the silence of Hollywood, this story is far from over. Watch now and hear the truth for yourself. 1 minute ago, the world of wrestling and Hollywood collided in a way no one saw coming. Linda Hogan, the ex-wife of the most iconic professional wrestler to ever step into a ring, has just leaked never-before-seen footage of Hulk Hogan's final hours. And what's in it has left millions stunned. This is not just another tribute video. It's not a collection of nostalgic highlights or well-worn anecdotes. This is raw. This is unfiltered. And for many, this is the first time they've truly seen the man behind the legend, a man grappling with the weight of his own mortality. Hulk Hogan, born Terry Gene Bollea, was more than a wrestler. He was a cultural juggernaut. He sold out arenas, starred in movies, inspired generations, and built a brand that transcended the ring. But according to Linda, there was a side of Hulk that the cameras rarely saw, the side that spoke in hushed tones when the lights were off, the side that knew his time was running out. And in this leaked footage, recorded just days before his sudden and shocking death, Hogan appears frail, his once booming voice softer, yet filled with an urgency that chills you to the bone. The clip begins with Hogan seated in a dimly lit room. Not the blinding glare of an arena, not the colorful chaos of WrestleMania. Just a quiet, intimate space. His skin looks pale under the warm light of a single lamp. His hands, once massive and intimidating in the ring, tremble slightly as he grips a coffee mug. And then he speaks. "Brother, if you're watching this, I guess it means I'm gone. And there's some things I need to say before that happens." The words hit like a steel chair to the chest. For fans who grew up seeing Hogan as invincible, hearing him acknowledge his mortality feels surreal. He talks about pain, not the kind that comes from body slams and leg drops, but the pain of watching the world move on without you. The pain of fading relevance in an industry that never stops looking for the next big thing. And then, almost cryptically, he adds, "If I leave this world, I want you to know it wasn't an accident. And it wasn't just time catching up to me." That sentence alone has ignited a wildfire of speculation online. What did Hogan mean? Was he hinting at something darker? Was there foul play involved? Or was this simply the philosophical musing of a man reflecting on a lifetime of choices? According to Linda Hogan, the recording was made at Hogan's Florida home. She claims she found it on a small external hard drive tucked away in a desk drawer, labeled only with the words, "For when I'm gone." She insists she sat on the footage for weeks, debating whether to share it, torn between respecting his privacy and honoring what she now believes was a deliberate final message to the world. "I had to do it," Linda told a close friend. According to an exclusive leak to a Florida-based entertainment journalist. People deserve to hear it because Terry wanted them to. This was him, no kayfabe, no showmanship. Just the truth. But here's where the story gets murkier. Multiple insiders, from former wrestling colleagues to Hollywood acquaintances, have hinted for months that Hogan's health had been in decline long before his official cause of death was announced. Publicly, the narrative was simple: a sudden cardiac arrest brought on by years of physical wear and tear. Privately, some whisper about an untreated infection, complications from decades of surgeries, even the possibility of poisoning, and then there's the timeline. Hogan was last seen in public 2 weeks before his death at a charity event in Tampa. Video from that night shows him smiling for cameras, albeit moving more slowly than usual. A few fans reported he seemed distracted, glancing around the room as if wary of someone watching him. The leaked footage adds fuel to those rumors. In the same recording, Hogan lowers his voice and says, "There's people out there who don't want me talking. People who think I've seen too much, said too much. Maybe they're right. But I can't go without saying this. The business, and I don't just mean wrestling, it ain't what you think it is, brother. Those words have set social media ablaze. Wrestling forums are dissecting every frame, conspiracy channels on YouTube are already posting hour-long breakdowns, and even mainstream media outlets are cautiously covering the leak, careful not to speculate without hard evidence. Still, the public reaction has been overwhelming. Hashtags like #HoganTruth and #WhatReallyHappened are trending globally. Fans are split between grief and suspicion. Some believe this is Hogan's way of warning about corruption in wrestling and entertainment. Others see it as the ramblings of a man battling pain medication, illness, and old ghosts. But Linda's decision to leak the footage hasn't come without backlash. Some of Hogan's closest friends, including a few legendary names from WWE and WCW, have accused her of exploiting his death for attention. One former tag team partner, speaking anonymously, told an industry insider, "Hulk was private when he wanted to be. If he didn't release that himself, I'm not sure he wanted it out there." Linda might think she's doing the right thing, but she's opening a can of worms that might hurt more people than she realizes. Others, however, are defending her, pointing out that Hogan explicitly addressed the audience in the video, suggesting he knew and wanted it to be seen after his passing. Behind the scenes, there's another layer of tension brewing. Hollywood, where Hogan made crossover fame in films and television, has been eerily silent. No major studios have issued statements. Former co-stars who once jumped at any chance to share stories about him are suddenly unreachable for comment. A well-known director who worked with Hogan in the 90s reportedly declined an interview request, citing legal sensitivities. Why the silence? Some believe it's because Hogan's words might implicate powerful figures in entertainment, people who would rather this conversation never happen. Even in the wrestling world, responses have been cautious. WWE released a short, sanitized statement. "We mourn the loss of Hulk Hogan and honor his contributions to the sport of professional wrestling. Our thoughts are with his family and loved ones." No mention of the footage. No comment on the claims. As more details emerge, questions keep piling up. What exactly was Hogan referring to when he said it wasn't an accident? Who were the people who didn't want him talking? And what did he mean by saying the business isn't what you think it is? Linda Hogan says there's more. She claims the leaked clip is only part of a longer, 40-minute conversation Hogan recorded with an unidentified cameraman, a conversation in which he names names, recounts private threats, and details a series of strange events in the months leading to his death. For now, she says she's holding back the rest for the right moment. But if history has taught us anything, it's that when secrets like this start to surface, the pressure to release everything only grows stronger. Already, reporters are camped outside Linda's home. TMZ, Rolling Stone, and several wrestling news outlets have sent formal requests for comment. Social media influencers are speculating wildly, and fan tributes are taking on a darker tone, more memorial vigil than celebration of a life. And somewhere in all of this, the truth about Hulk Hogan's final days is hanging in the balance. Because this isn't just about one man's death. This is about the end of an era, the unraveling of a myth, and the haunting possibility that one of wrestling's greatest heroes spent his last days fighting battles none of us even knew existed. And now, thanks to Linda Hogan, the world may finally have to face those battles, whether it's ready to or not. When Linda Hogan first sat in her living room, watching the full 40-minute video play out on her laptop, she says she knew instantly that the shorter clip she released would be enough to shake the world. But she also knew the rest of the recording was worse. Much worse. It begins innocently enough. After Hogan delivers his somber opening in the first few minutes, the part Linda leaked to the public, the camera shifts. He leans back in his chair, takes a long sip from his mug, and stares at the floor for nearly 10 seconds. It's the kind of pause that makes you feel like something heavy is about to be dropped. Then, almost reluctantly, he speaks again. "You think you know the business? You don't. None of you do. And if you did, maybe you'd understand why I never really retired." He goes on to talk about money, not his own, but the money behind the money. He hints at silent investors, shadow deals, and corporate pressures that kept him in the spotlight long after his body was screaming for rest. "I didn't just wrestle for the fans. I wrestled for people you've never heard of, people who don't want their names in the credits, but always get their cut. And when I finally said I was done, they didn't take it well." According to Linda, what follows is a string of names. Some belong to people deep in the wrestling industry, promoters, financiers, and even a handful of former executives whose influence stretches beyond the ring. But others belong to people in Hollywood, in media, and in the business world. It's here that Linda pauses the video during her private viewing with a close confidant. She knows that releasing these names could lead to lawsuits, threats, or worse. She says she's already been warned twice in the past 48 hours to be careful. The footage then shifts in tone. Hogan's voice drops even lower, almost conspiratorial. He recalls meetings that weren't in boardrooms but in back rooms of hotels, often after big pay-per-view events, where deals were struck over drinks and whispered conversations. It wasn't about storylines or titles, Hogan says. It was about keeping certain people in power. People who'd do anything to stay there. This is the part of the recording that has insiders sweating. Multiple sources in the wrestling industry have told journalists that if Hogan's claims are true, they could expose decades of corruption, not just fixed matches, but financial crimes, hidden payouts, and ties to powerful figures far outside the wrestling bubble. But here's where the recording takes an even darker turn. Hogan starts talking about the months leading up to his death. He describes feeling watched, seeing unfamiliar cars parked near his home for hours at a time, receiving strange phone calls where no one spoke on the other end, and noticing that certain friends suddenly stopped returning his messages. "They wanted me quiet," Hogan says, staring directly into the camera. "And I wasn't going to be quiet anymore." Then comes the most haunting line of the entire 40 minutes. The one Linda has so far refused to release publicly. "If I end up gone, brother, it's not because my heart gave out. It's because someone made sure it did." Those words, loaded, chilling, and almost accusatory, have become the center of every online discussion since news of the longer footage leaked to a few select journalists, and with them, the backlash against Linda Hogan has intensified. Within hours of her initial release, she began receiving a flood of emails, some from fans begging her to put the full video online, others from anonymous senders warning her not to. Her phone rang repeatedly from blocked numbers. A single message played on her voicemail over and over. "You're making a mistake, Linda. For your sake, stop." The wrestling community itself is split. Some retired legends have publicly urged her to finish what Hogan started and release the entire recording. Others are accusing her of sensationalizing her ex-husband's death to stay in the headlines. Former WWE commentator Gene Larkin, a longtime friend of Hogan, told a podcast audience, "Look, I knew Terry. If he wanted it out there, he'd have found a way to put it out there himself. He was stubborn like that. I think Linda's playing with fire. And once you light that match, there's no putting it out." But for every critic, there's someone defending her. Wrestling journalist Mark Valenti published a column calling her leak the most important piece of wrestling history in decades, arguing that this is bigger than any personal feud, it's about the truth. Meanwhile, Hollywood's silence has only deepened the mystery. Not a single one of Hogan's former co-stars has addressed the video directly. Even The Rock, who has publicly expressed his admiration for Hogan many times, issued only a short, carefully worded post on Instagram. "Legends never die. Rest easy, brother." No mention of the footage. No mention of the accusations. Privately, sources close to Linda say she's been contacted by multiple media outlets offering substantial sums for exclusive rights to the entire video. She's turned them all down, at least for now, claiming she doesn't trust anyone to tell the story the way Terry intended. And yet, the pressure is mounting. Fans are organizing online petitions, demanding transparency. Conspiracy theorists are cross-referencing Hogan's claims with old backstage rumors, building elaborate timelines of events that might support his words. Former wrestlers are being cornered by reporters at airports, asked if they knew what Hogan meant. All the while, Linda remains in the eye of the storm. Her every move watched by the same press she says once hounded Hogan into silence. In the final minutes of the leaked footage, Hogan's tone changes again. He looks tired, but there's a calm in his voice. I've made mistakes. I've hurt people. But I've also tried to stand up for the ones who couldn't fight for themselves. If this is my last match, then I guess I'm going out swinging. And if you hear this, just know, I loved you all, brother. Then, almost symbolically, he reaches forward, covers the camera lens with his hand, and the screen goes black. It's an ending that feels deliberate, like he knew this was the final curtain for Linda Hogan. The decision now is whether to honor that curtain call or rip it wide open, and for the millions who idolized Hulk Hogan, the question is no longer just how he died, but why. The morning after Linda Hogan's initial leak, the wrestling world had become a pressure cooker, and somewhere deep inside it, WWE's top brass was trying desperately to contain an inferno. In Stamford, Connecticut, the WWE headquarters glowed like a fortress under gray skies. Inside, behind closed conference room doors, executives, PR advisors, and legal counsel huddled around a long table. The meeting, according to one insider, was tense from the start. Phones buzzed nonstop with alerts about trending hashtags, reporters camped outside, and an avalanche of fan theories that made the company look complicit in something far darker than they were prepared to admit. According to one senior staffer who later spoke anonymously, the instructions from the top were clear but unsettling. Do not engage with the content of the video. Do not confirm or deny anything Hogan said. Shift focus to his legacy, not his allegations. On the surface, WWE's public stance remained one of grief and respect. Behind the scenes, however, the mood was closer to panic. Not because of Hogan's criticism of the business, they'd weathered that sort of talk before, but because of the names. The executives didn't know exactly which names were on the full recording, but some feared they might be theirs. One former creative team member, who left the company years ago, claims he received a call that morning from a contact still working at WWE. The voice on the other end was urgent. If she releases that whole video, it's not just wrestling that's in trouble. We're talking lawsuits, criminal investigations, careers gone overnight. Meanwhile, outside of the wrestling bubble, Hollywood was quietly mobilizing. Linda Hogan's phone began lighting up with messages from numbers she didn't recognize, some offering her advice, others warning her to consider her safety. A retired television producer who once worked on a project with Hogan even showed up unannounced at her property in Clearwater, Florida. According to a neighbor, he stayed only 5 minutes, but when he left, Linda looked visibly shaken, and then came the unexpected ally. On the second day after the leak, a former WWE superstar, one Hogan had mentored in the early 2000s, reached out to Linda through a mutual friend. The wrestler, who has since left the industry and transitioned into a successful career outside of sports entertainment, told Linda they had their own archive of private recordings. Recordings, they claimed, of late-night locker room conversations and hotel meetings where similar concerns were voiced by other big names in the business. It's not just Terry, the former superstar allegedly told her. There's a whole generation of us who saw the same things. He was just the one brave enough to put it on camera. This was the first real crack in the wall of silence. If Linda chose to work with this ally, she could potentially corroborate Hogan's claims with independent evidence, something that would make it much harder for critics to dismiss the video as the ramblings of an aging legend. But before Linda could even decide, a new twist hit the headlines. At 9:13 a.m., a 90-second audio clip surfaced on a popular wrestling podcast. The host claimed it had been sent anonymously via an encrypted email. The voice on the clip was unmistakable, deep, raspy, and punctuated with that trademark brother, but this time, Hogan wasn't talking to a camera. He was talking to someone else. The exchange was short, but it was enough to light a fire under the conspiracy theories. Unidentified voice. You can't say that on record, Terry. You know what'll happen. Hogan, I don't care anymore. I'm tired of protecting them. Unidentified voice. They'll come after you. Hogan, let them. I've been fighting my whole life. Within hours, the clip went viral. Fans replayed it in slow motion, dissecting background noises, trying to identify the other speaker. Some swore they heard the faint echo of a hotel air conditioner, suggesting it had been recorded during Hogan's frequent travel for appearances. Others claimed they recognized the second voice as belonging to a former promoter known for his ruthless backstage politics. WWE refused to comment. Hollywood kept quiet. But inside Linda's circle, there was no mistaking what this meant. Someone else had access to Hogan's private conversations. And if this 190-second clip had made its way into the public sphere, the rest could be out there too, in the hands of people with their own agendas. That night, Linda called her new ally. According to a source close to her, the conversation was brief but decisive. "If they're going to drip this stuff out, we might as well get ahead of it," she told them. If Terry was willing to fight, then so am I. Plans were set in motion. A secure digital vault was created to store the full 40-minute footage, along with any corroborating material from other former wrestlers. A lawyer known for taking on high-profile corporate cases was brought in. But even as Linda prepared for the next phase, the pressure kept building. Someone left an envelope on her front porch containing only a single printed message. Some stories are better left untold. No signature, no address, and yet she didn't flinch. The footage, the audio clip, the whispered warnings, they had all become fuel for a fire she no longer intended to put out, because somewhere between grief and fury, Linda Hogan had crossed a line. She wasn't just protecting Hogan's memory anymore. She was going to war.by the fifth day after Linda Hogan's initial leak. The story was no longer just trending, it had detonated. Every major outlet, from mainstream news to late-night talk shows, was mentioning Hulk Hogan's final video. But until that day, no one had been reckless or brave enough to actually say the names rumored to be on his list. That changed at exactly 8:02 p.m. Eastern Time. The trigger came not from TMZ or a wrestling gossip site, but from Sportsworld Now, a cable sports network known for its aggressive investigative programming. Without warning, in the middle of a primetime segment on Hogan's legacy, host Carter Langford turned to the camera and said, "We've obtained verified portions of the unreleased Hogan footage. And in this material, Hulk Hogan names individuals he believed had a direct role in silencing him and possibly shortening his life." The control room cut to a heavily watermarked video. There was Hogan, slouched in the same dimly lit room, his voice low, his expression grim. The audio was raw, no background music, no edits except for censoring one or two slurs Hogan used in frustration. "You want to know who kept me working hurt? Who made sure the checks kept coming even when I could barely walk? It wasn't Vince alone, brother. There were others. Name redacted pulled the strings. And then there was name redacted, yeah, the one you've seen smiling on every Hall of Fame stage. And don't forget, name redacted, the guy who made millions off my name while I was in a hospital bed." Sportsworld Now bleeped the names, but they didn't have to say them. The visual cue told the audience that the unedited video existed. And Carter Langford wasn't done. "We can confirm that two of the names mentioned are still active in the wrestling industry. One holds a senior executive role in a major promotion, and another works in mainstream entertainment." The effect was instant. Social media went nuclear. Fans began cross-referencing every Hall of Fame speech, every executive photo, every known Hogan associate. Hashtags like #HoganList and #WhoDidIt trended within minutes. But while the public was guessing, behind the scenes, insiders knew. And some of them started to talk. A former WWE road agent, who'd been with the company during the height of Hogan's career, posted a cryptic tweet, not surprised by what Terry said. "Surprised it took this long to come out. The list is real." Within an hour, 3 more ex-wrestlers hinted they had stories of their own. One even went live on Instagram, visibly nervous, and said, "If Linda wants to release that full tape, she has my support. And I have receipts." Not everyone took Hogan's side. A well-known retired promoter fired back in a podcast interview, calling the footage a dying man's bitterness and accusing Linda of dragging good people's names through the mud. He warned that defamation lawsuits could bury her faster than a steel cage match. But the tide was shifting. For the first time since the leak, the conversation wasn't just about whether Hogan had been wronged, it was about how many others had been, too, and then, the biggest bombshell yet. That same evening, Carter Langford returned on Sportsworld Now with an exclusive follow-up. He revealed that the network had secured legal clearance to air an uncensored 47-second clip from the unreleased portion of the footage. The decision was risky. Their lawyers knew it could trigger a storm of cease and desist orders, but Langford insisted the public interest outweighed the risk. The clip was simple. No theatrics. Just Hogan leaning toward the camera, voice shaking with a mix of anger and resignation. "They didn't just hurt me, brother. They hurt a lot of us. You think I'm the only one? Ask," full name spoken clearly. "Ask another full name. They'll tell you. If they're brave enough." The moment the names were heard, the internet went into overdrive. Wrestling journalists confirmed that both were high-profile figures, one a former booker turned executive, the other a media mogul with deep ties to multiple sports and entertainment companies. Within an hour, both issued statements denying Hogan's claims. One called them categorically false and an insult to the industry, while the other hinted they were consulting legal teams about this reckless airing of defamatory content. But by then, the damage was done. The footage had escaped into the wild. It was ripped, reposted, and mirrored across hundreds of accounts before takedown notices could even be issued. Fan forums began compiling timelines linking the named individuals to known backstage controversies. Old rumors resurfaced. Former staffers came forward anonymously with eerily similar stories, and in Clearwater, Florida, Linda Hogan watched the chaos unfold from her living room. According to a friend who was with her, she didn't look scared. She looked resolute. "They think this is the end," she reportedly said. "It's only the beginning." That night, she posted a single sentence on her verified social media accounts. "Terry told me to finish what he started. I will." And with that, the countdown to the full release had unofficially begun, because now the world wasn't just asking what Hogan had said. They were demanding to hear every single word. All right, here's Section 5 in the same cinematic, emotional, investigative tone. This is where Linda Hogan moves toward releasing the entire 40-minute recording. The legal war heats up, and we finally see the closing moments of Hulk Hogan's last message, a part that shakes even his most loyal fans. Script. Section 5 by Day 6, the situation had spiraled into something no one, not Linda, not WWE, not Hollywood, could control. The partial name drops from Sportsworld Now were still dominating every corner of the internet, but in Linda Hogan's world, a much bigger decision had already been made. She was going to release the entire 40-minute video. It didn't matter that her phone wouldn't stop ringing with unknown numbers. It didn't matter that she'd been served twice with letters from high-powered law firms warning of immediate legal action if she moved forward. It didn't even matter that some of her oldest friends were begging her to reconsider. The night before she made her decision public, Linda met privately with her small circle of advisors. The meeting took place not in her home, but in a quiet, rented office in an unmarked building in downtown Clearwater. Thick curtains were drawn. Everyone's phone was placed in a Faraday pouch to prevent any potential listening. According to one person in the room, Linda's tone was unwavering. "Terry didn't record this for it to rot in a drawer. If I let them scare me into silence, then they win. And they already took too much from him." The plan was meticulous. The video would be uploaded simultaneously to multiple encrypted cloud servers, timed for public release on 3 separate platforms. A written statement would accompany it, explaining that the decision was hers alone and that she understood the legal consequences. But before the plan could even be finalized, another curveball HIT.AN envelope arrived at the office building. No return address, no postage, meaning it had been dropped off by hand. Inside was a single USB drive. Taped to it was a note scrawled in black marker, "The part you didn't know you had." Against her lawyer's advice, Linda plugged the drive into a secure, offline laptop. Inside was a 4-minute clip, clearly from the same recording session as Hogan's final video, but missing from the copy she'd found in his desk drawer, and it wasn't filler. It was the end. The footage picks up with Hogan leaning forward, his elbows on the table, breathing heavy. His tone is different now, less angry, more like a man who's made peace with something inevitable. If this is the last thing I ever put on tape, then I want to talk to the fans, the real fans. The kids who wore my shirts, the parents who brought them to the matches, the people who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. His eyes glisten, but he never breaks his gaze from the camera. I know I wasn't perfect. I messed up a lot. But I fought for you. Every time I stepped in that ring, I told myself, if I can make one person smile tonight, it's worth it. And for a while, that kept me going. But there's something I couldn't protect you from, the truth about this business. About what it does to the people in it. It chews you up, spits you out, and if you're lucky, you just walk away broken. If you're not, you don't walk away at all. Then he pauses, takes a slow breath, and his voice drops to a whisper. If you're seeing this, it means I didn't walk away. The weight of those words sits heavy. He looks down for a moment, then back at the lens. Don't let them tell you it was just time. Don't let them say it was an accident. Remember me how I was, but don't forget why I'm gone. And if you love this sport, if you love the people in it, then fight for them. Don't let them get hurt like I did. He leans closer, almost filling the frame, and says one last line, I love you, brother. Always. The screen fades to black. No music. No credits. Just the sound of the camera shutting off. When the clip ended in that Clearwater office, no one spoke for nearly a minute. Even Linda, who'd been steely and composed for days, had tears in her eyes. That's it, she finally said. That's the reason. She now had the complete picture, the original 40 minutes plus this missing final message. It made her decision even easier. She wasn't just releasing a controversial tell-all, she was releasing Hulk Hogan's goodbye, but she also knew that once it went live, the pushback would be relentless. The two executives Hogan named unbleeped in the Sports World Now segment had already filed for injunctions. WWE's legal team had reportedly drafted a statement designed to discredit the context of the footage. And one Hollywood mogul had sent Linda's lawyer a terse message that read, if you think you can win this, you're wrong. We'll bury you in court. Linda didn't care. The clock was ticking. At exactly 7 p.m. Eastern the next evening, she planned to press upload. She'd arranged for mirrors to go live in case takedowns came within minutes. She'd prepared a short introduction video of her own, just her in front of a plain white wall, saying, I'm Linda Hogan. This is Terry's message. He wanted you to hear it. Now you will. But if releasing it was going to be the most dangerous move of her life, she was ready. Because for her, it wasn't about protecting herself anymore. It was about making sure Hulk Hogan's last words weren't buried under corporate spin and sanitized tributes. It was about making sure the world heard exactly what he wanted to say, in his own voice, on his own terms, and in less than 24 hours, that's exactly what was going to happen. The evening of the release felt like the calm before a storm. Except everyone knew exactly when the storm would hit. At 6:59 p.m. Eastern, nearly 500,000 people were already refreshing Linda Hogan's verified channels. Wrestling forums, YouTube live chats, and Twitter feeds were stacked with one-word posts. Waiting. Ticking. Here we go. Linda sat in that same nondescript Clearwater office, her laptop in front of her, the complete 44-minute and 12-second recording queued and ready. She wasn't wearing makeup, wasn't dressed for television. She didn't want to look polished. She wanted to look real. Her team counted down the final seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2. She clicked upload. The video appeared instantly across 3 platforms: YouTube, a wrestling fan site, and a decentralized streaming service that couldn't be easily taken down. Within minutes, it was mirrored on dozens of backup channels. It began with Linda's short, solemn introduction. Terry recorded this knowing it might be the last time he spoke to the world. He left it in a place I could find. I promised myself I'd only share it if I knew it was what he wanted. Now I know. This is his truth. Make of it what you will. Then no fade-ins, no cuts, just Hogan in that dimly lit room. The first 10 minutes were reflective, even tender. He spoke about his career highs and lows, his love for the fans, the sacrifices his family made. But it didn't take long before the warmth in his tone gave way to a harder edge. They'll talk about the titles. They'll talk about WrestleMania. But they won't talk about the nights I wrestled with broken ribs because if I didn't, someone else would take my spot. They won't talk about the surgeries I paid for out of my own pocket because the company wouldn't cover them. They won't talk about how many of us died broke, in pain, forgotten. At the 15-minute mark, he began naming names unbleeped and censored. Former executives, promoters, agents, even a couple of media personalities who had worked outside of wrestling but allegedly played roles in protecting the people Hogan accused. The names were delivered not as a rant, but as a list read by a man who'd rehearsed it in his mind for years. After each, he offered brief but damning context, stories of late-night calls, financial manipulation, and whispered threats. At one point, he paused, sighed, and looked straight into the camera. You can call it paranoia. You can call it bitterness. But I call it the truth. And if you were in my boots, brother, you'd call it the same. The halfway mark of the video brought the shift everyone had been waiting for, the part sports world now had hinted at but never aired. Hogan began recounting the final months of his life. He spoke about finding strange scratches on his car after a meet and greet. About discovering a listening device in his guest house, which he says a private investigator later confirmed. About getting anonymous text messages with nothing but the words, "Stop talking. I've been threatened before." Comes with the territory. But this was different. This felt like the end of the road was coming whether I wanted it or not. He described feeling increasingly isolated. Friends stopped calling. Projects dried up. His once loud home became eerily quiet. I started looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. And that's no way to live. That's when I decided if they're going to come for me, they're going to have to do it after I say what I need to say. The final 10 minutes. Including the USB clip Linda had only recently discovered, hit the audience like a gut punch. Hogan's voice softened again. To my kids, I love you more than I ever showed. To my fans, I owe you everything. And to the ones who did this to me, you didn't win. Because I'm still here, speaking. And now everyone's going to hear it. The last line was the one already etched into the minds of those who had heard the earlier clip. If you're seeing this, it means I didn't walk away. The video ended in total silence. No outro. No watermark. Just black. The fallout was immediate. Within 20 minutes of the upload, YouTube had taken the video down for content policy violations, but by then, it had already been downloaded, clipped, and shared thousands of times. Twitter was flooded with full and partial reuploads. Wrestling podcasts scrambled to record emergency episodes. WWE released a statement at 9:14 p.m. calling Hogan's claims unsubstantiated and deeply regrettable, while stressing that they honor his contributions to the sport. But their attempt at damage control backfired. Screenshots of the statement were quote-tweeted with timestamps from the video that directly contradicted it. Two of the named individuals retained high-profile crisis PR firms, who immediately began pushing counter-narratives to the press. One hinted that Hogan's comments were the result of medication-induced confusion, which infuriated fans who saw it as a smear against a man who could no longer defend himself in person. Hollywood's reaction was equally split. Some A-listers who had worked with Hogan expressed public support for Linda. Others went conspicuously silent, a silence that fans interpreted as guilt by association. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Late that night, a sitting U.S. senator tweeted, "I've seen the Hogan video. If even half of it is true, there needs to be a federal investigation into labor exploitation and abuse in the sports entertainment industry." It was the first time the story had jumped from the world of wrestling into the realm of politics, and it meant the stakes had just gone from reputational to potentially criminal. By sunrise the next day, #HoganTruth had been tweeted over 8 million times. Wrestling historians were calling the leak the most significant non-match event in the sport's history. Fan vigils sprang up outside Hogan's Walk of Fame star in Hollywood and at the gates of his old wrestling gym in Clearwater, and somewhere in the middle of the chaos, Linda Hogan sat in her living room, watching the sun rise over the Gulf. She had no illusions about what was coming: the lawsuits, the smear campaigns, the threats. But she also knew one thing with absolute certainty: Terry's voice was out there now. Unedited. Uncensored. Unstoppable. And no matter what happened next, that was something no one could ever take away. By the third day after the full release, the story was no longer confined to wrestling podcasts, fan forums, or entertainment gossip sites. It had become a matter of national conversation. The senator's tweet calling for a federal investigation had triggered a chain reaction on Capitol Hill. Within hours, 2 more senators, one from the opposite political party, had publicly backed the idea. Then a House representative announced she was preparing a formal inquiry into the treatment of professional athletes in entertainment-based sports. Cable news anchors were now saying the words Hulk Hogan and Congress in the same sentence, a pairing no one could have predicted just a week earlier. Behind the scenes, things moved even faster. Linda Hogan received an encrypted email from a sender who identified themselves only as another brother in the fight. Attached was a scanned affidavit signed and notarized from a former WWE medical staffer. The statement claimed that they had been instructed by senior management to clear Hogan for matches he was physically unfit to perform in, despite clear medical evidence that further strain could result in permanent damage. The whistleblower's affidavit also referenced other wrestlers, describing a pattern of coercion, where athletes were pressured into keeping silent about injuries in exchange for career stability. Linda forwarded the document to her legal team, who in turn passed it to the senator spearheading the call for investigation. But that wasn't all. 2 more whistleblowers stepped forward, both former wrestlers whose careers had ended prematurely due to untreated injuries. One appeared on a live morning news show, visibly emotional, holding back tears as they said, "I watched Terry go through things I went through myself. I was too scared to speak. I'm not scared anymore. If this investigation happens, I'll testify under oath." And then came the biggest shock yet. While sifting through Hogan's old storage unit for personal items to donate to a fan memorial, Linda stumbled upon a battered leather briefcase. Inside were stacks of spiral notebooks. Hogan's private journals, spanning from the late 1980s to just months before his death. At first glance, they read like travel logs, dates, cities, match results. But in between the mundane entries were pages of coded notes. Names were replaced with initials. Events were described vaguely, as if Hogan feared the notebooks might be read by someone else. Linda brought the journals to a trusted family friend, a retired journalist who had covered wrestling in its golden era. After cross-referencing the entries with known timelines, the journalist confirmed that several pages corresponded directly to moments Hogan mentioned in his final video, and added details he never spoke on camera. 1 entry from 1997 stood out. "Met with Jay again. Same hotel. Talked about what happened to M, says it wasn't an accident. Warned me to keep my mouth shut or I'd join him. Not sure how long I can keep doing this." The initials M and J have since become the subject of intense speculation online. Fans and journalists alike are combing through wrestling history to figure out who they refer to, with some pointing toward high-profile wrestlers whose careers and lives ended under mysterious circumstances. As word of the journals leaked, the pressure on WWE and its affiliates mounted. Stock prices dipped for the parent company. Sponsors quietly paused ad campaigns linked to wrestling events. A popular streaming platform announced it was reevaluating its licensing deal for archival wrestling footage. Hollywood wasn't spared either. One of the named media figures in Hogan's tape was quietly dropped from a high-budget project. A major talk show host canceled a segment that was supposed to feature an actor who had worked closely with Hogan. The public, however, was energized. Fans began organizing under a new hashtag Justice for Hogan, which wasn't just about Terry Bollea anymore. It was about every athlete who had been exploited, silenced, or discarded. GoFundMe campaigns were launched to support whistleblowers' legal costs. Independent wrestling promotions pledged to adopt stricter health and safety standards, and through it all, Linda Hogan remained the reluctant torchbearer of this movement. She granted no interviews, made no additional public statements, but her presence was everywhere. Her decision to release that video now framed as the spark that lit a fire under decades of buried stories. Then, late one evening, Linda received a call from a blocked number. A male voice she didn't recognize spoke only one sentence before hanging up. "You haven't even scratched the surface." It wasn't a threat, at least, not an obvious one. But it was enough to make Linda realize something. The story wasn't nearing its end. It was getting bigger, and if the journals were any indication, Hulk Hogan had been sitting on truths so dangerous they could shake not just wrestling, but entire industries connected to it. It began in a small, locked room at an undisclosed location in Florida, the kind of place you'd expect to see used for a high-stakes poker game, not the decoding of a dead man's secrets. Linda Hogan sat at a table with two people she trusted implicitly. The retired journalist who had first recognized patterns in Hulk Hogan's journals, and a forensic linguistics expert brought in to analyze the writing. Scattered across the table were photocopied pages of Hogan's spiral notebooks, each marked with mysterious initials, shorthand phrases, and time-stamped dates that spanned more than 30 years. The expert's method was meticulous, cross-referencing the context of entries with Hogan's travel schedule, news reports, and known industry events. Slowly, the coded world began to open up. The most haunting revelation came when the initials M and J finally cracked. M referred to Mark "Mad Dog" D'Angelo, a mid-card wrestler in the late 90s whose career ended abruptly after a suspicious in-ring accident left him with spinal injuries. He died just 2 years later, officially of complications from pain medication. But in Hogan's journal, the entry was blunt. M didn't slip. He was made to fall. Too much heat on him after what he saw in Vegas. J was even more shocking. Jameson Jimmy Blade Carroll, a behind-the-scenes talent scout with deep ties to both wrestling and Hollywood stunt work. Carroll vanished in 2005 without explanation. His disappearance was quietly written off as personal leave. Hogan's journal paints a different picture. J tried to warn me about M, said the same people had eyes on me now. Told me if I wanted to live, I should take the payout and disappear. I told him I wasn't built for hiding. That was the last time I saw him. The room went silent after those two revelations. For years, both men had been footnotes in wrestling history, tragic but largely forgotten. Now, in the context of Hogan's writing and his final video, they became potential puzzle pieces in a much larger, darker story. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the investigation had moved from Twitter talk to legal reality. Subpoenas were issued to WWE executives, former promoters, and even medical staff. A formal request was sent to Linda Hogan's attorneys for access to all of Hogan's recordings, journals, and related material. One congressional aide, speaking off the record, said, "The scope has grown beyond Hulk Hogan. This is now about the systemic exploitation of performers across decades. If half of this is provable, the fallout will be unprecedented." WWE responded aggressively. Their lawyers filed motions to block certain evidence from entering the public record, arguing irrelevance and potential damage to unrelated third parties. But the very act of fighting disclosure only deepened public suspicion. Fans and independent journalists began live-tracking every move, mapping which executives had been subpoenaed, which former wrestlers had suddenly gone quiet, and which sponsors were quietly withdrawing their support. And in Florida, Linda's position became more precarious by the day. One evening, as she left a late meeting with her legal team, she noticed a black SUV idling across the street from her driveway. It didn't move when she parked. It didn't move when she entered her home. When she peeked out her window an hour later, it was still there, lights off, engine cold. The next morning, a manila envelope was slid under her door. Inside, a single piece of paper with one printed line, "Stop feeding the fire." Her attorney insisted on alerting the authorities, but Linda refused to back down. She called her closest ally in the wrestling world, the former superstar who had offered corroborating recordings, and told them exactly what she planned to do next. "If they think I'm going to hide in my house and be scared, they don't know me. We're putting everything out there. All of it." The decision carried enormous risk. Not only would releasing the remaining journals and corroborating evidence burn every bridge she had left in the industry, but it could also compromise the federal investigation, unless she timed it exactly right, working with her lawyers. Linda set a date. 3 weeks from that day, she would hand over every piece of material to the congressional committee and simultaneously make it public. It would be the point of no return. Once those files hit the internet, no injunction, no lawsuit, no corporate spin could bury them, and somewhere, in one of the very circles Hogan had hinted at in his final words, people were realizing they had less than a month to stop her. What none of them knew was that Linda had already made backup arrangements. The files weren't just in her possession anymore. They were in secure, encrypted drives held by trusted third parties in multiple states, with clear instructions to release them early if anything happened to her. It was a move straight out of a spy thriller. But this wasn't fiction. This was the real fight for Hulk Hogan's truth, and Linda Hogan had just made it impossible to kill the story without silencing her entirely. By week 2 of the congressional investigation, the quiet intimidation tactics against Linda Hogan were no longer quiet. It started one evening when she left a grocery store and noticed a man leaning against her car, pretending to scroll his phone. He never spoke to her, never even looked up when she approached, but she saw the faint reflection in his sunglasses. He was filming her. 2 days later, someone spray-painted "liar" across the side of her white SUV. And then came the phone calls. Not threats in the traditional sense, no shouting, no demands. Just a single breathless exhale, held for 3 seconds, and a click. Linda knew the playbook. She'd seen it used on Terry before: isolate, unsettle, exhaust. But she also knew something else. Once these tactics went public, they'd lose their power. So she called a local news station. And for the first time since the release of Hogan's video, Linda Hogan sat in front of a camera for a live interview. "If you think this is going to scare me into silence," she said, looking directly at the lens, "then you don't understand who I am or what Terry stood for. Every threat, every shadow, every whisper, all it does is tell me I'm on the right path." Her words were clipped and replayed across national broadcasts within the hour. And with that, the intimidation campaign had failed in its first mission. It had turned private pressure into public outrage. But while Linda was taking a stand, the information war took a sharp turn. An anonymous online account posted 3 heavily redacted pages from Hogan's journals to an independent file-sharing site. The leak was quickly traced back to a wrestling fan forum, but by then, the pages were already viral. Even with the redactions, the impact was devastating. 1 entry, dated 2003, referenced a payout to keep an injury under wraps before a national broadcast. Another described a dinner meeting in LA with 2 studio heads and redacted to finalize the deal to make it all go away. The biggest bombshell came from an entry marked simply as Vegas, 2001: "They told me flat out, if I don't play ball, I end up like Jay. I believe them." Speculation went wild. If Jay was indeed Jameson Carroll, as previously decrypted, then this journal entry was the clearest link yet between his disappearance and a direct threat against Hogan's life. The leak had another effect: it widened the investigation. Congressional staffers, already knee-deep in subpoenas and depositions, suddenly began cross-referencing Hogan's notes with other performer testimonies. The overlap was undeniable. At least 4 other athletes, all from different eras, told eerily similar stories of payouts, intimidation, and sudden career-ending injuries under mysterious circumstances. And then came the twist. 1 staff investigator privately told a journalist that Hogan's story, as shocking as it was, might actually be a fragment of a much larger pattern. The names in his journals weren't only connected to wrestling, they were connected to boxing promotions,